This is an air conditioning unit out of a BMW 330 E46. I've had to pull it out because I need to replace the air conditioning evaporator, but I thought I'd make a quick video just of the unit and what there is, and especially some of the things that people have difficulty with. So firstly, this is what the unit would look like when it's sitting in the car. Obviously the dashboard would have to be out to actually remove this completely. The wiring that goes in the front, basically the stereo unit sits about here, the air conditioning control panel sits about there. There are two sets of wires that actually come from the unit itself. There's another pair that come from the car itself that actually plug into the back of that unit. The outlets for it, there are 4 vents on the top, the 2 on the outside for the windscreen up the top there. The 2 in the middle are for the vents that come out the front, so the side, either side, and the centre vent. And there's 2 side ones here that have big plastic ducting that actually go down the side, and they go into the footwells and also down underneath the seats. The 4 along the top here, when you put the dashboard in, it slots straight over the top of that, and there's a big set of ducting that drives that all to the correct spots prior to going to those vents, etc. The things that actually drive the ventilation, or where it actually goes to, there are a bunch of motors here. There's 1, 2, 3 here that drive those 3 separate things. This one here, basically there's a little motor on each of them, and then there's a little gearbox, and depending on which one it is, it sort of works a little bit differently. But enough said that rotates really slowly, and in this case here, if I just pop that arm off, that would just move that arm back and forth, which would in turn move the flapper valve inside, and each of these is generally connected to the other side as well. So when I move that, you can't see it, but this one on the other side is also moving. For the center 2 and these on the outside, for the vents at the front up the top, these motors just have like the little gearbox, but then they just twist little arms that actually go through the middle of this. If you actually pull all the sides off, these can pop out and you can dismantle everything, but basically there are flapper valves on the top here that just rotate around. On the other side of the unit, this is where you'd be looking from the engine side. So the motor, so the blower motor is in behind here. To remove that, you can remove this cover here, pop those 2 things off, and that just unclips off after you remove the screw. And then to remove the blower motor, there's DIYs out there of that. You need to remove the side parts here, this top, and then you're just going to unbolt it from the inside. Other things we've got the heater core. So from the coolant system, there are 2 pipes. One of those will go to the solenoid that actually drives whether or not flow actually goes to the coolant. The other one goes back to it's basically the outlet from the engine. So the warm air or warm fluid would actually come from the engine, come into the core, and then back again out via the solenoid valve. And obviously that solenoid valve, either being open or closed, allows that warm fluid to come through. On the other side here is the air conditioning side. So we've got, this is the expansion valve, which is the thing that changes it from high pressure to low pressure. So if you want to remove the expansion valve, this one here, you can actually do that with this still in the car. So you'd have to disconnect that double pipe. There's an O-ring on either side, and there's basically, it's popped straight in, and there's a nut that just goes over the top of that to hold it in place. Then you've got 2 small Allen key screws. They just come out, and this will just wiggle straight out. And if I pull that out, you would actually see the evaporator connections on the other side, and there's just an O-ring on each of those, and then you've got the evaporator core inside. This is the side here where behind all of this is where the final stage resistor is, and behind here. This is right up the front in the footwell on the right hand side. That's the driver's side if you're a right hand drive car like mine, or the passenger if it's left hand side or left hand drive. Getting at this is quite frankly a pain in the ass, but I'm going to hopefully show you how to do that. So I would suggest, when I've done this before, I've actually removed the front seat so I can actually lie upside down and actually get my head all the way up inside here to try and do it. Otherwise it's just, you've got to be the Indian rubber man to actually get in under there and actually do it correctly. So how are we actually going to get at this? To actually get at it, the first thing that happens is that this is the flapper valve for the ventilation that goes down to the footwell. There's a big piece of dusting that comes in here, so that needs to be pulled off, and that requires you to pull the dashboard. Actually comes down the side here, has to be reefed out quite a bit of distance to actually then remove that. It's quite difficult. From there, the first thing you've got is this is a motor that drives these flapper valves at the front here. Okay, for these is an arm that actually comes through which connects to this little motor here, and I'll pull that off to show you. You can see this little arm which actually goes through to the other side, that when it's in position that actually needs to be disconnected. You could actually try and disconnect it after you pull that out. I'm not sure how successful that would be. You could go to the other side and disconnect it from the engine side and then pull that through. But enough said that you can see that depending on the position that it's in, this little arm here, if the fresh air vent is open like that, so that's actually now coming from the engine bay, so it's fresh air coming in, it actually rotates this arm, so this here would actually be all the way around that way. So instead of it sitting right up in here, it's actually going to be around the other side, which is going to be much, much simpler to remove. To remove this motor, which you need to actually get out the final stage resistor underneath, there are two screws. There's one down here and there's one down in there. They're both Torx screws. I use a long Torx screw like this is what you would need to actually get down in there, and they're a T20. So all of these screws on the unit are a T20. And then once you do that, there's a simple electrical connection there which drives the motor. You can pull that off. When you actually put it back in, it's not just put in there, but actually slots into a little slot in there as well, which holds it in place. So it needs to be, make sure it's put it in there. And then once you pull that out, and I like to remove this and pull that out. Getting these things out, the way they work is there's this little plastic piece here, and that little round slot there actually holds this in place. Now, depending on where you are on the motor, or on the unit, sometimes they're a bit hard to pull out. What you don't want to do is just reef that up, because you can actually break that off. The easiest way I've found to do this is to actually just get a little screwdriver in there and just wiggle that in there, and that'll just pop straight out, and then you're not going to put any pressure on it. And then when you're actually putting this back in, you can see where it slots in there. I'm just going to put that down and then just push that in, and it's just going to pop into place. But because of where that was sitting, okay, you can see that that's going to be really hard to get out, whereas if I actually rotated it all the way around to here, okay, so it's going to be more visible, then I'd be able to get a screwdriver underneath it much more easily and remove it. Once you've got that out of the way, now you can see the final stage resistor, which sits behind there. Big electrical plug, all we're going to do is top and bottom. There's a big clips you just squeeze and pull those off. And now you can see there are two screws there and there that need to come out. So I'll remove those now. And once you remove that, then you've got to clip up the front here. So that clip just there, you need to push that forward, and it actually needs to go forward quite a way, and it actually holds up on here on this front plate. It's a real pain. And then to try and wiggle that out, it's sometimes best to get a screwdriver in here to actually open that gap up a bit. And then you can finally get that out. Now if you imagine you're now sitting in where you're lying down backwards or upside down in the footwell of the car, this is a real pain to try and get out, and it's mainly because of that clip there trying to get that out. And there's your final stage resistor there. Orientation of the final stage resistor on the way back in, it might be a bit hard to say, but there's a little sort of cutout just there, which is going to go in that cutout there. That's just going to slot all the way in, and we're going to manoeuvre that in, get it under that clip there, and then you can put those two screws back in, and then it's just the reverse from before. If you want to get access to the top of the heater core, which I've heard some people do to clean it out, relatively simple. Well, I guess you've got to pull everything in front of it, like the stereo, etc., off, and all that wiring, and just pull all that out of the way. This is the connection for the temperature sensor downstream of the heater core. So we can just disconnect that, and then we can just get a screwdriver and just pop out 4 clips around the perimeter of that. It actually slots into some holes there, so there's no clips down the bottom. That just rotates forward and up she comes. You can see the temperature sensor which sits on the inside, and there's the heater core there. There are the 2 pipes that run rearward to the engine bay. This connection here, there for the flapper valves that go to the foot vents. If you actually wanted to pull this out, be interesting to see how you go. I don't think there'd be that much room. I've heard people trying to do it before, but what you're going to do is there's 2 aluminium clips here. They just get pulled out, and then these pipes will pop straight up. However, because they're actually screwed in around the other side here, I don't think you'd have that much room to move. I suspect it would be much easier, albeit a lot more work, to do it when obviously it's out of the cart like this. So you can pull those out. There's an O-ring which goes around the pipe. It would slot back down in, and then just push the clip back in again. On the left hand side of the unit is another motor, and this motor drives the flapper valves for the left hand side for either fresh air ventilation or from inside. So with each of these, there's 1 flapper valve there, and that's the one that would open to allow fresh air in. You can see the fan that's inside there, but that is also connected via some connections down the bottom here to one that would close on the inside. So when this one closes, the one on the inside here opens, and then when that does that, the other one would close, and that's all driven by that 1 motor. The one on the other side is identical, except for the fact that that is driven by the motor, a separate motor, which is the one over the final stage resistor. To dismantle the unit, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the motor section on the engine side. I'm going to disconnect all of the electrical connections on this side here, and all those that run around to the front of the unit, so they're all just sitting out there like that. And on the other side, I'm going to remove that motor there, that fresh ventilator motor. Also, there's a connection down here for the temperature sensor, and that is for downstream of the air conditioning evaporator. So there are 2 temperature sensors, one for the heater core and one for the evaporator. So that's the one for the evaporator there. We're going to disconnect those, have those just sitting there like that. And then to remove it, I'm going to leave the expansion valve in there. That doesn't have to come out because it'll just slide straight through. There's one of those standard little silver clips around the side here that needs to come off. And then there are 5 screws that need to come off. I've already removed most of them. There's 1 here above the expansion valve, and there are 4 around the perimeter here. In addition to that, there's a little seal which I've already removed. There's 2 screws for that just seals off the heater core, and then you just slide that straight off. So I'll just remove this last one here. And once that comes off, that just pulls out like that. There's the inside of the motor there. You can see the motor assembly. All the wiring comes away with that now, so there's no wiring connected to the main part of the unit. And inside here, the air conditioning evaporator and the final stage resistor is just sitting down there, so it gets direct airflow straight from the fan. You can see the air conditioning condenser, so the expansion valve sits there. And if we look at the side of that, the 2 pipes you can see here are the ones that are coming from the evaporator. So this just comes straight off. Also, I'll point out, you can see that angle that that's sitting at. That's critical. It's really important that an OEM evaporator will actually have it at this angle. It's about 16 degrees or so, because on the other side, when in the engine bay is where those hard pipes, that what they call it, a dual pipe or something, goes in there. If that's not exactly the right angle, it just will not go on. And this is the second one, and I've actually had to bend this into place and it still doesn't fit properly. So there are some eBay evaporator cords going out or going on sale that are relatively cheap. They look like a solid unit, but a lot of them don't come out at this correct angle. They come out at 90 degrees, so you've got to bend these to the right spot. So about that 16 degrees, what my advice to you to do is, if you are replacing this, have a look at this and maybe take some photos of what the angle is, so when you then reinstall the next one, it's in exactly the right position, the same as what it came out as, because if it's not, it's going to be really hard for you to fit it. Here's a look at the fresh air ventilation doors. So if I move the vent, which actually allows external air in, it's just going to close that one off there, which would come from the cabin side. Okay, and if then that closes the one that comes from outside, that would open. That allows the fan to blow from the cabin side. To continue pulling this apart, there are now just a bunch of those little silver clips. I've removed most of them already. They're around the perimeter. Just pull all of those off. I've just left two of those on. I'm just going to pull those off. And once you do that, on the side here, there'll actually be a clip that looks like this, which holds on the pipes there and holds everything nice and firmly in place. So there's one screw that just pulls that out. And then once you've done that, then this can just pop straight off. You have to give it a bit of a wiggle to get around the coolant pipes, and then that just comes straight off. And there is the final stage resistor in there. That bottom piece just pulls straight off, and now I've got the air conditioning evaporator, and we've got the heater core there. So the heater core, you can just pull that straight out. Just be a little bit careful, because underneath that in here, that's where that sensor is at the front, the temperature sensor, and that's where the two connections are that you would need to remove to replace those O-ring pipes, or if you're going to replace the heater core itself. The evaporator, it just pulls straight out like that. You would normally have this, being this eBay thing, it didn't have the foam and stuff around it, which makes it snug in there. So this one's going back, and an OEM one is coming. And there is the connection, so there's an O-ring on either side there for the expansion valve. So those two screws, you just pop that straight on, and that just goes straight on again. So that's pretty much it, how the unit is all put together. Here's another look at the final stage resistor. You can see those two screws there and there. The two that hold that motor on over the top of it are there on these two spots. But this clip here, it's so large, and that barb on it is so large, and quite frankly those two screws are there, so it's not going to come off. I don't really understand why it's there, but it actually makes it really quite difficult to get the thing out. So I'm actually going to shave that off and get rid of that. Because I remember when I replaced this a couple of years ago, it was such a pain getting this damn thing out that I really don't think there's much value in that clip, so I'm going to get rid of it. If you're going to remove the air conditioning unit, this is what the car's going to look like once it's out. As you can see, the whole dashboard has to come out. The steering column has to be moved to the side, and then the frame, which looks like that thing there, which holds onto the dash and holds onto the airbag over on the left-hand side here. These are all the steering column connections in here, connections for the actual dashboard along the sides. That has to come out. All instructions for how to do that are in the new TIS online, so you don't really need to go to talk about it too much here. It's explained reasonably well, and really it only takes probably a good hour or so to get the dashboard out. But then a couple of things that made it a little bit difficult to get the frame out. The carpet, there's a connection in here where it bolts into the sides here. The carpets were a real pain. The way this all fits in is kind of really jammed in really snugly, that frame, and actually you need to cut the carpet here just a little bit to actually get that out. That's underneath the dashboard, so it's fine. It's not going to be visible once everything's back in again. But that's something to be careful of. Other things, something that was a real pain, is all the wiring goes underneath here, and this plastic piece actually sort of sat up like that and sort of sticks out and stops the air conditioning unit from coming out. It was driving me mad. It just took me forever to try and work out what was going on. You probably have to get a big screwdriver in and have to push that down. What I've done here is I've put some plastic and glued it down so it actually can slide straight off, rather than getting, because this bit was sort of growing up and then I couldn't pull it back. You couldn't really see what was going on. So a big screwdriver under there, if that's actually happening, is going to help you out. On the engine side, you'll need to disconnect. Obviously, you'll need to evacuate the air conditioning system first if you're going to remove the air conditioning system. There are two connections here, and you just disconnect that. The double pipe that I was talking about before is this one that actually runs back to here, and that's the one that plugs into the expansion valve on the other side. Before you do that, you'll need to drain the coolant. So you'll need to lift the car, drain it from the drain cock underneath. Something I found which is a good way to actually get rid of all the coolant out of the heater core, because you want to do that prior to removing it out, is when I drained it, I just drained it out of the bottom of the radiator, but then what I did is I removed obviously the airbox and everything here, and this is the heater valve which normally sits down in here. That's the solenoid valve that allows flow to either go to the heater core or not. And all I did was the nearest connection, because there are two pipes back here which are connected to that core. There's one which actually goes back to the coolant reservoir. Is the other one goes to the core and goes to here, and all I did was disconnect that, put this up high so nothing drains out, and then I did was just blow through it, and you just blow all the coolant back out. It goes back to the drain and comes out into your bucket, which is great, but you get the vast majority of the coolant out of the core. And then once you've done that, when you pull it out, obviously don't just tip it up so everything pours out, but then you can pull it out and you don't get any coolant going inside the cabin.